Our story today is considered one of the worst cases that have occurred in the history of Egypt recently, because the criminal is not just a person who committed an individual crime, but a serial killer. The ugliness of the details of the case, from torture and murder, makes you feel that he is not an ordinary person, but a devil in human form, even though he is an educated, cultured, and famous person. In addition to his excellent financial status, you stand in amazement because a public opinion case shook Egyptian society. He is the Tagamoa Butcher. Our story begins on May 16th, 2024, when young men were driving their car on the Ismailia Port Said Desert Road. While driving, they stopped due to a car malfunction. While they were there, they noticed something lying on the ground. When they went to see what this thing was lying on the ground, they were shocked to discover the body of a woman who was approximately in her early 30s. She was completely naked and in critical condition. Her nails had been removed, her hair had been cut, and there were traces of ropes on her hands, feet, and neck, in addition to bruises and wounds all over her body. Of course, these young men called the police, and immediately the police and security personnel arrived at the crime scene and combed the area. But they did not find any trace of the person who committed the crime or any evidence leading them to him. All they saw was a bag lying a few meters away from the body, containing women's clothing. They concluded then that these clothes belonged to the body. The first thing that became clear to the police was that this body had not been killed in the same place, but had been killed in another place, and that the criminal had moved it to this desert in the hope that it would decompose or be eaten by animals. Here the police took the body and the clothes they found in the bag and sent them to the forensic medicine department, which proved that the body had died as a result of torture and strangulation. It was also found that there was a large amount of drugs in her blood, and that she was in her early 30s, as it turned out, and the body looked as if she had died a short time ago, indicating that the killer had committed his crime only hours ago here. Investigations into the case began, and the police found no evidence that would lead them to anyone related to the crime. Here the police resorted to surveillance cameras, but the place was a desert, and there were no cameras. They reached the nearest place with a camera before the desert road to search for whether any car had stopped in this place or not. Perhaps the police will be able to identify the killer and reach his owner, because this step is complicated and will take a lot of time and effort due to the large number of cars on the road every day. The important thing is that the police decided to form a second team to search with them and try to find out the identity of the body. Through exploring and investigating with people who know her and her friends, they can discover any disputes or enemies that might push someone to kill her. The detectives were able to identify the body. She is a 32-year-old woman from Giza Governorate, but they learned that no one was hostile to this girl or had an interest in killing her. Through searching and investigating, the detectives concluded that this crime may be related to the other 3 crimes that occurred before that, namely that they found a body in November 2023. Still, this body was decomposed, and it was clear that it had been dumped for months, so they were unable to identify it. They also found 2 other bodies in 2024, with a close time interval. The 2 bodies found were of a 19-year-old girl and a 34-year-old woman, one from Nasser City and the other from El Zawiya El Hamra. The strange thing is that the 2 bodies were different in age and location, so how could the police link them and say that the killer was one person? 2 bodies were found lying on the desert road, both completely naked, but there were signs of torture, hair pulling, nail pulling, strangulation, wounds and scratches all over the body. However, forensic medicine proved that the 3 bodies had large doses of drugs in their blood, and the drugs were the same as those found in the 4th body. Here, the investigators realized that they were facing a very mysterious case, and a dangerous and intelligent criminal who knew how to commit 4 crimes. No one could suspect or report him, except that he was a serial killer, meaning that he continued his crimes, and if the police did not arrest him, he would be the 5th and 6th victims. The police tried hard to track the cameras that returned to the place where the body was found, but they only saw 1 car stopped in this place, and it was clear that its owner was wealthy. The police were able to reach the owner of the car and the killer from his license plate number, which they called the Butcher of the 5th Alkmaar City. This butcher is called Karim Salim, 38 years old. Karim was born in 1987 in Alexandria Governorate. His father decided that he and his family should live in America. But Karim moved between America and Egypt and did not obtain American citizenship because, as his ex-wife Lobna says, he caused problems in America and went to prison, so he did not obtain American citizenship, and his family brought him to Egypt for fear of being imprisoned again. So he chose to study in Egypt. Karim met a girl named Lobna. Lobna is of Egyptian origin and English nationality. Karim fell in love with Lobna, and they decided to marry and live in America. After a short period, they had their son, Zayn, and chose to settle in Egypt. They came to Egypt and rented an apartment in the 5th Alkmaar City. After a short period of stability, Karim applied to work in an international school with fake certificates, the same school where his son Zayn studied. However, Karim was a troublemaker who saw himself as the best and others as wrong. He did not like anyone who confronted him because of his mistakes and many problems with his colleagues. The school decided to dispense with him, and then he and his wife Lobna opened a beauty center project in the 5th settlement, which was successful. During Lobna and Karim's marriage, Lobna discovered the wrong side of Karim, which is that he is suspicious and takes drugs, especially the dangerous drug shabu, but she chose to stay with him until 2016 because he would not allow her to leave him, and she was afraid of him. One day, Lobna's sister visited her sister, but Karim threatened to kill them both if she did not expel her sister. The next day, Lobna took her son Zayn and fled to another city for a while, but Karim's father returned from America and asked to see Zayn. Lobna trusted him and gave him her son Zayn. From that moment on, Lobna has not seen her son until now. Karim took his son and moved to a second house in the 5th settlement. At that time, he made a strange request to the broker, wanting a soundproof room in the house. Although it was a weird request, the broker ignored the reason and brought it to him in the new house. We will later learn that this room will be called the Death Room. During the past 2 years, Karim has become an influential and well-known figure on social media. He taught people the correct pronunciation of the English language, some psychological advice, and proper behavior. He gained a large audience on the TikTok and YouTube platforms in a very short period.
To call in sick to work like a professional. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well today. Unfortunately, I won't be coming in. I'm afraid I won't be able to make it into work today due to...
Don't say thank you. Say I appreciate it.
In a very short period, he became famous for attracting a large audience on TikTok and YouTube, to the point that his account had more than 600,000 followers. The last video he published was on April 23rd, 2024. The strange thing is that in the same month, he killed a woman. He used to kill his victims and get rid of them, then appear to people as an educated person. The police learned Karim was in the Andalusia neighborhood, Al-Tagamoa. When they entered the apartment, he spent most of his day at home, but they discovered something unusual. The soundproof room. The lighting was red, and inside this room were all the torture tools that anyone could imagine, and it became clear to the police that Karim was a sadist, someone who loved to torture the other party during the relationship. The important thing is that during the investigations, Karim completely denied his knowledge or connection to these crimes and told them, "I didn't do anything." From here, the police began their investigations, and when they asked the neighbors about Karim, they told them he was miserable. No one interfered in his life, and because his lifestyle was strange, he would come every day drunk with many girls and young men who frequented the apartment. He would play loud music all the time. Still, he did not harm any of the neighbors or cause a problem with anyone. And here were the police when they emptied the cameras of the place where he was and saw that the victims who were killed had entered his house. Despite the long time that had passed, the victims did not come out. They also saw something strange. Karim went out with a large bag and then returned with it again. But the last time, Karim went out with the bag and did not return with the bag again, and this bag remained evidence against him. Karim continued to deny all the charges against him until the police were able to open his phone. They found videos of Karim himself torturing the victims, and Karim confessed to all his crimes and said that the first victim was the one they found in November 2023, and he killed her 3 months before that. So she decomposed and they did not know her identity, and he said that he met her in a nightclub and noticed that she liked to drink drugs and alcohol. And here Karim knew that he could catch up with her and offered to go with her home and that they would have a romantic relationship in exchange for money. But as soon as Karim arrived at the apartment, he brutally assaulted her and tortured her continuously and gave her large doses of drugs after having sex with her and torturing her. And while torturing her, she died. He took her body and threw it on the desert road, and after months he found that no one asked about her, so he felt very reassured and decided to repeat it. And his second victim was a 19-year-old girl he met on TikTok and offered to come to him to teach her English. And when she went home, he did the same thing he did with the first body, as he tied the victim with a rope around her neck, and she died by strangulation with the rope. He also met a third victim in a nightclub and offered her to come with him to his house. She agreed. When they arrived home, he brutally assaulted her and tortured her until she died. As for the fourth victim, the body that the group of young men found on the desert road was the reason for his discovery. As for the room lined with soundproofing, terrifying things happened in it, to the point that one of the victims sat for a whole month while being tortured. Karim knew how to choose his victims well. He chose those who had no family or those whose families did not ask about them, and he knew that their families would not file reports and would not care about their absence at all. Of course, he chose these victims so that no problems would occur. After Karim confessed to everything, he changed all his statements again. Once he said, "I killed only one person," and once he said, "I killed many, and I do not know their number." Of course, all of this was so that the investigators would believe that he was mentally ill or not in full possession of his mental faculties. Here the court decided to refer Karim to the medical committee to determine the extent of his mental health and whether he was conscious or not. It turned out that Karim was in full possession of his mental faculties, and the doctor said that he was knowledgeable and knew how to evade his words. Here the judge sentenced him to death by hanging, but the sentence has not been carried out yet.